one friend. Situations in life coming, you gotta trust them. Found out many times in life you can't trust men. So I rolled solo, that process was an adjustment. Friends let you down, not around when you're needing them. Only here to take like a child, got you feeding them. Better off leaving them like salt, that's the seasoning. Killing black people, that sugar really depleting them. Knowledge over ignorance, rising above predicaments. Fighting for equality, speaking for all the innocence. These drugs they been giving us, turning our people vigilant. Innocent dissidents, violence is coming imminent. Gotta fall a couple times to learn the lessons faster. Thinking will it matter if I skip a couple chapters? This life that I'm after got me climbing up the ladder. Won't be another rapper, bankrupt with the chapter. On another mission to get rich, it's big chips. Air past the crown on solid ground, the kid spits. On another level, these devils can't block the business. The kid get psycho with a rifle, get your wig split. Change the game passively in the back, so happily. Jersey. Welcome to another edition of the Community Soldier Podcast, featuring your host, local community soldier and activist Justin Counts. Welcome on. Hope you guys are tuning in tonight. We got a real important topic that I like to take a deep dive into. So if you are joining in, pull up a chair. This is going to be a good conversation. And y'all know me. I'm going to take you through there. We're going to have the facts. If you have, at any time, like if you got a question, feel free to leave your question in the comments. We will see it on the live. So this is definitely an open discussion, open conversation. But tonight's topic, we're taking a deep dive into a crucial conversation, especially for us black men. And I'm talking about tonight mental health and trauma, and why seeking support is more important than ever. So this is a very important topic for me because for years, I've gone through life listening to all of the stigmas connected with mental health. For years, me personally, I've struggled with this myself. And for years, people always told me, oh, you can do this, you can do that. It's all in your mind, right? You ever get people that tell you things like that? Like, it's all in your mind. You can change this and you can do that. It sounds easy, but I've realized even through my own personal struggles with mental health that it's time that we have to really drop a lot of the stigmas associated with seeking out for professional help. So we're going to talk about it, man. I want you guys to share your personal experiences as well. This is an open discussion, which will lead me to our men's group, Jackson Strength Network. We will be meeting for our first in-person meeting on the 30th. That's coming up this week. Which day is that exactly? That's on a Thursday. 30th at 7 p.m. We will be at the C-Store Deli. So, the Jackson Strength Network is a support group for men. And I felt the need that there was a strong urge, right, for me to create this group. And it came from my own personal needs. And I'll discuss that too. See,
it wasn't until I lost a good friend, right? He was more than a friend. Y'all know the big homie, Big E, the big homie. When Big E passed away, it wasn't for a few months after he was gone that I realized how much a hole in my life was missing, right? I didn't realize that he was more than just my friend, but he was also, in a way, my therapist. And it's funny because he had no formal training of any sort, but he was a great listener and he always knew what to say. So for many years, I never needed any therapy, any counseling services, and things like that because I had my counselors close around me. At any time, if I was experiencing something in life, I can consult the people that were around me, like my wife and Big E. So when part of that was taken away, I realized that, man, I really need to get connected with somebody. So that made me think there's no safe space for men to talk amongst men. I've seen brothers post things on Facebook, and sometimes their comments get taken the wrong way, which can happen easily because you can't really tell a person's tone through a text message or through a Facebook post. So a lot of times things get misconstrued when you speak them on Facebook because people can't really read your tone or how you're trying to say things. So I realized that men need a safe space to talk amongst men. You know, at one point in time, we used to be able to have those conversations in barbershops. We used to be able to have those conversations at the bar, places where men meet up with each other and hang out amongst men. But nowadays, you see that the whole social thing is kind of going away. A lot more people are being more reserved into they self. So what you're seeing is a lot of people don't have anyone to talk to outside of their mother or their significant other. And one thing, fellas, I gotta tell you, your significant other cannot be your main therapist. And I'm gonna tell you why. It's not their job to fix you. It's not their job to fix you. That's the therapist's job. It's your job to fix yourself. When you having to rely on somebody else to fix you, that you're in a relationship, it creates a unequal power dynamic. And a lot of men get labeled as being weak. That's where a lot of the stigmas come from. So we're gonna break it down, man. We're gonna talk more about that. We're gonna talk more about trauma, the effects of trauma, especially from childhood, how it shapes our lives, and we're gonna talk about the stigma that holds us back from seeking this help. So first up, we're gonna talk about understanding the stigma around mental health, like especially, and I'm speaking especially from the viewpoint of a black male because that's what I know, right? So I can speak on from the perspective of me, right? So I don't know about y'all, but I know for me and a lot of my friends, we grew up in households, environments where we had to be tough. In fact, I remember from the age of 2, my father would say, "All right, now that's enough crying. You ain't hurt. You know, dust yourself off. You'll be all right." And I remember if you continued to cry, they would bring out the saying, "Don't let me give you something to cry for real." So that conditioned me at a very young age to not show those type of emotions, right? Not to acknowledge those type of feelings. Because if you cried, that was considered to be soft. And growing up in poverty and you in underprivileged neighborhoods, you can't afford to be looked at as soft. You can't afford to be looked at as weak. And I understand like why our parents were that way. I understand. My grandfather was born in the 30s. So he spent the majority of his upbringing in the segregated South. He would often tell stories of having to walk with his head down. And if a white man came on the same side of the street, he would have to hold his head down and cross the other side of the street. He would tell stories of having to walk 3 miles up the road just to get to school with no shoes and a string tied around his books for a book bag. He would tell us those stories not for us to make excuses, not for us to be at war against the white man, not for us to hate the white man. It was actually quite the opposite. He was conditioning us for the cruel realities of life. They were conditioning us for the cruel realities of life. You see, our ancestors went through so much generational trauma that many lessons get passed down from generation to generation to generation. And through those lessons, you can actually see that they result from trauma. You can see generationally the effects of the trauma that had on the people. What's the real stats on mental health for black men in America? Well, they say only 26% of black men with mental health challenges actually seek help, compared to 45% white. Only 26% of black men in America with mental health conditions actually seek out help, compared to 45% of the white male counterparts. And that is really, it boils down to stigmas and how we look at mental health. How do we see it? How do we treat it? How do we talk about people going through mental illness? It's a fact right now that suicide is the leading cause of death for black males aged 15 to 24. Our young black males, leading cause of death. Not gun violence, not video games, not food. Suicide. And that's a direct example of how we're failing our community when it comes to mental health treatment. When you look at almost every problem in our country right now, especially when it comes to substance abuse community, it's almost like 99.9% true that there's mental illness laying around somewhere in the background untreated. There's generational trauma somewhere untreated. Suicide is the leading cause right now for death for black males aged 15 to 24. That's crazy. Not gun violence, suicide. This says a lot about our society right now. 26% of black men with mental illness are reaching out for services compared to 45% of the white male counterparts. That shows you that there's a stigma. There's something in there that's taught generation to generation to make us believe that it's not real. And I want to be the first person to say that it is. I've been suffering through it for 40 years without knowing what's going on, without understanding it. And the older I got, the more that I realized that there's something to this, that it's not just something that people make up to push pills down your throat. And I still don't believe in the pills and everything like that. I believe in taking a holistic approach. But I also understand that in every science, the more information that we have, the better we are equipped to handle the solutions and the problems. What is the cost of us being silent on this issue? We're seeing it in our communities right now. Young children are committing self-harm. Young children are walking around depressed. Young children are throwing away their lives now, making poor decisions, poor sexual choices, leading them to prison and further trauma. We got to do something about it. But I want y'all to watch this video so you can get an idea of exactly what I'm talking about.
I was always taught to be strong in this world. Told to never let my guard down because at any moment I could be attacked without a moment's notice, that my skin made me a target. Skin that has persevered through many trials and tribulations, from seeing my mama raped by landlords, to my father being beaten and stripped of his manhood, to my brothers and sisters being separated into jobs for this bigger system. My skin has always been under attack. Yet somehow we prevailed through it all, through all the lynchings, literacy tests, new Jim Crows, war on drugs, the gentrifications, police brutalities, food deserts, mass incarcerations. We survived and adapted. and pushed to change because our very existence depended on it. Our very existence depends on this. This black strength. Strength that has carried us for decades, but is undermining an important aspect of our humanity and feeding in on itself. Being strong all the time took away our ability to speak about our weaknesses, our sadness, our mental illnesses. This silence is killing us. On top of that, we lack proper mental health care access and endure mistreatments by medical professionals who cannot relate to us in their practice. On top of that, we stigmatize mental illness to preserve this place of our strength, damaging ourselves, and among black children observing a spike in suicide rates because they may feel that their place in heaven is way better than the place here today, because when black life isn't valued enough for professional help, adequate housing, or even breathing, life here degrades in value in comparison to life after. Black bodies, strong black souls are floating through the wind, seamlessly letting go. Strong black bodies are screaming for help, but suffering in silence and being socially and systematically being put on quiet. Black souls are strong, but we do need help when we do fall through the cracks. That is why I want you to know that you can patch things up with me. All right, we can kick it back like it was a drive-through movie in the 1970s. We can get some help from people who actually understand us, refute our standards of stigmatizing mental illness, and fight against the structures that chronically misdiagnose what this really is. Fight against the racism that brings up our mental health issues and lowers our treatment options, bringing us one step closer to seeing no other option. I want us to see that we have a way to heal this wound that has been widening ever since day one with no means of contracting. I want us to know that the seed that we sow today is the harvest we reap tomorrow. And when we finally reap, we can find peace in these moments, noticing that the danger isn't gone, but we finally have a place where it feels like it is. The grounding of black bodies.
Man. That's deep. He said the grounding of black bodies. That's why we have the men's group, right? Because not often in today's society, as a man, period, can we have the space to actually speak and say how we feel, how we truly feel, right? Because in today's society, I mean, we have to be worried about, hurting people's feelings. We have to be worried about being socially correct. We have to worry about so many factors. So what you see a lot of times is people just being silent and feeling like they can't speak. What you see is a lot of people suffering in silence. Now, I'm a big advocate against this because this is something that I myself have done many times, and I still do many times in my life. And that comes from that old background and that old upbringing. Pull yourself by the bootstraps mentality. Never miss a day of work mentality. Hard work mentality that we got from our forefathers, where we feel like we're supposed to push through no matter what. But that attitude came from us having to survive, us having to fight to survive. That's where that attitude comes from. And it took me a while to realize that, why there was so much urgency in their tones, when speaking about things like that. Why we weren't allowed to cry, why we weren't allowed to be soft. Our forefathers and our parents, they learned the hard way of what happens when you're soft. Women watching their husbands be violated in vicious, buck breaking ceremonies in front of everyone. Men watching their women and their children be sold off to be somebody else's property, being utterly powerless to defend yourself. My grandfather lived through lynchings in the Deep South during segregation, where he couldn't even speak his mind because you would end up something similar like Emmett Till. So for hundreds of years, we have been conditioned to keep pushing, keep fighting, keep working, no matter what you're feeling. Slaves didn't have time to process their feelings after their children were sold off into slavery or after they were beaten viciously in front of everybody. They weren't allowed the time to cry and process those feelings. So generationally, over time, those people became a little bit hardened of heart. Epigenetics tells us that we hold these memories in our DNA. Those memories shape our mental health. That's why we have to start paying attention to trauma, generational trauma, because all of these things lead down the road to mental illness. And we don't even realize it because a lot of times we don't even acknowledge it. For so many years, I had to deal with people asking, "What's wrong with you?" Now I know that people should have been asking what happened. Because life teaches us that we don't start this way, but we end up this way, and it's usually because of a series of things that happen to us in our life. That's what childhood trauma is about. See, trauma isn't just about big life-changing events. It can also come from small, repeated experiences, like growing up in environments full of stress, violence, or neglect. This has a major impact on our development as children. Scientists have already found out that for a child living with, let's say, a substance addicted parent or a mentally ill parent, science shows us that depending on the time that a child grows up in an environment like this, you're actually shaving off years of their life. Years of their life expectancy washed down the drain. Their actual development. Studies show right now that childhood trauma causes developmental problems in children. It causes depression. It causes all different types of adverse behaviors from growing up in that trauma. What you see is children that can't regulate their emotions. What you see is children that struggle with building relationships and maintaining relationships. And what you see is children with cognitive developments. I found it interesting. They said for a child, especially a young child that's, let's say, a child under 3, for a child under 3, their ears aren't even developed yet. They're not fully developed yet. So loud noises are excruciating to small children. And just think about all the mothers that blast loud music when they ride in the car with the babies, or the fathers that do that. But they said specifically when dad comes home or mom comes home and they're yelling and they're screaming, they said that yelling and that screaming actually activates the fight or flight system inside of our brains. Chemicals get released that help us, that cortisol, those adrenaline chemicals in our brain that get released in our fight or flight. That was the design that we have to help us to survive. But for children, small children, their brains aren't developed enough to handle that. And they said for a child, when you come home and you're screaming loud, for them, it sounds like being in the middle of the highway, standing, facing the semi trucks coming towards you. And let me tell you, this is how you know that you've activated your child's flight or fight response system. You ever yell at a child and then they make that blank spaced out look to you, like they gone? You've just flooded their brains with chemicals that their brains ain't even old enough to process, and it causes them to freeze. Too much of that every single day, say you got a drunk dad that comes home, slaps mom up every day. You do that every single day. Science has already shown us that you're creating dead spots in the child's brain. That's how they know those development issues are real, because of the trauma. And I'm not a scientist, I ain't no doctor. I just read it like you can. The studies is out there, and I'm gonna show you a couple, just so that y'all know that it's real. Here go another quick video to help you understand trauma.
As children, we were always told, do not talk to strangers. Stranger danger, that's the phrase. We were taught that to make sure we didn't talk to anybody we didn't know. Family. Family, on the other hand, is all that is right and good in the world. Family is love. But what about when it isn't? As children, my brothers and I spent the summers with family while our parents worked. I was the youngest, and as such, I slept in our grandparents' room. Once everyone was asleep, our grandfather would wake me up, and he would touch me. I didn't know it wasn't right. I was 3 years old, and touch was supposed to be love. Well, every summer we would go back, and what he did the year before, he did again. As I got older, I realized what he was doing was wrong. It was abuse. But I didn't know how to stop it. It would go on until finally, at 9 years old, I found the courage to speak up. Now, speaking up ended the abuse, but that didn't make me whole again. I was broken. I was damaged. I felt unworthy. After speaking with the parent that I did, them acknowledging that it happened and it would stop, there wasn't another conversation on how to be okay, how for me to heal. It became that dark family secret that I was left on my own to figure out. How do you do that at 9 years old? I had no idea, so I gave it to God. What happened through that process is that I developed critical beliefs that without the professional help I truly needed, or an understanding of what it looked like, helped me find healing. My hope is that by sharing some of those with you today, I can help another one along the way. You are not responsible for what happened. Your mind is an incredible thing. It's designed to protect you. If you put your hand on a hot stove, you quickly pull it away. It's how you are wired. When you were sexually abused or molested, your mind tried to find a way to stop it. It tried to find a way around it, and it couldn't. That inability to protect you triggered a failure. With that failure, your mind took on a sort of unconscious responsibility to what happened. You carry it with you. You, in essence, became responsible for something you had absolutely no choice in.
This is why you see a lot of, especially women who've been through this situation. A lot of times you see that they check out. They describe that feeling of just checking out of their body, physically and mentally, with hopes that it would end soon. We see this as a pattern for people that have gone through serious traumas.
Allow yourself to acknowledge what happened, why your mind took on a sort of unconscious responsibility, and release yourself from the burden of it. Secondly, you were victimized, and you survived. Even when you think about the words victim and survivor, they have such different meaning and feelings. When I think victim, I think hurt and sad. When I think survivor, I think victorious and warrior. When you were sexually abused or molested, your abuser not only violated you physically, they raped you of your inner peace and power. You began to ask yourself, why me? Why did this happen to me? Wanting to know why is normal, but why is not going to bring you the peace and healing that you need. It's when you decide to take your power back. Make the decision. I was victimized, but I refuse to remain a victim to what they did. I survived. And as a survivor, every minute of time I spend in shame or pain is another minute they have power over me. No more. When you decide to shift to survivor, that is when healing begins.
That's the message that I wanted, man. That was the message that I wanted. See, as a black man, especially a man specifically, I can identify with what she's saying. A lot of times we feel powerless because we have been oppressed for so long. For so long, we've had the proverbial foot on our necks, on our backs for so long. How long does it take for you to start to believe the things that they say about you? How long does it take for you to start feeling that you don't have any worth? How long does it take for you to start feeling like you don't even belong here? Fighting every single day to fit in. because for some reason it must be your fault, that you're a black man and that America hates you. These are feelings that you feel every single day, right? And we push through it in our minds by checking out.
That is when peace starts to come back. You may never, ever find out why it was you. And that is not what's relevant. What's relevant is that you were designed with great purpose. And you need to get back on the path to what that purpose is. Lastly, if it hadn't happened, if you hadn't been abused, how would your life be different? Who would you be today? These are questions you ask yourself, you look back on, and you think, I wish I could have. Maybe, if you can't change what happened to you as a child. If you stand today a survivor of abuse or molestation, you do control what you do as an adult. You have that ability. You decide now what your life is going to be. Now, I'm not saying that by becoming whole again, you're going to forget about what happened. Even last night, as I slept at the hotel, I dreamt of being in this hotel. There were all these massive natural disasters happening around us, and we couldn't stop them. What I found was that I was going to find a way around them. I was looking for those that couldn't protect themselves, and I was taking them with me. I found one, and I put them in the car, and we drove this way. There was another trapped, so I hid down in the locker with them to protect them. The reality of that crazy dream was that as an adult, helping those less able or too scared to help themselves is a part of my purpose. What's your purpose? You are only given one life to live. Do not let the dark choices of another person define that for you. Bring light to your great purpose. And one day, when you look back on the life you lived, may you've accomplished all that God intended for you. God bless.
So I like the message that she had here, because even though I can't relate to what she went through, her trauma and her abuse was different. But the trauma and abuse that I've been through my whole life, I feel the same way in a lot of ways. And what she's talking about at the end is actually using what you went through, using that experience for good. We don't have to fall victim to failure or to defeat, to whatever that happened to us. You're not defined by the worst of your decisions. Some people give up and then they let that define their whole life. Oh, the woe is me. This is how you get stuck in that cycle of depression. And then you never heal from that trauma because we're always focusing on what happened to us. This woman here was sexually assaulted by her grandfather, a person that's supposed to love her, care for her, that's supposed to treat her like the princess that she is. But instead, he abused her, he hurt her, and these are things that stick around with you for life. These are life scars. And think about it, as a black man, when you have generational trauma, that means generational trauma means for generations and generations in your family. It means your dad, your grandfather, your great grandfather, your great great grandfather, all the way down the line. They live their life experiencing trauma, always experiencing trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. What does it do to your mental when you come from a generation after generation after generation of trauma? What does it do to you? I mean, I don't think people really understand, like, what trauma is, man, we gotta break it down, man. Let me play y'all one of my favorite TED Talks on the situation, man. This is one of my favorite people, Dr. Nadine Burke. Hold on. It didn't play. We're gonna get it to play. Here we go. There we go. Listen, this is a good one, man. So I want y'all to really hear this.
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente
We're gonna break it down
discovered an
too.
exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or a packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California, and together we opened a clinic in Bayview Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle, and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities: access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
ADHD.
But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a...
How many doctors misdiagnose our kids being hyperactive, ADHD, all of those things? I'm gonna try to fast forward a little bit, but she's gonna talk about why.
health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs.
What's the
second
effects?
thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was 4.5 times. For suicidality, it was 12 times. A person with an ACE score of
Remember those stats that I said. Suicide is the leading cause of death for black males aged 15 to 24.
7 or more had triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America.
Why is that? Cigarettes, food,
Well, of course,
drinking.
this makes sense. You know, some people looked at this data and they said, come on, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand, better than we ever have before, how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response.
That's what I was talking about
How does it
earlier.
work? Well, imagine you're walking in the forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland that says, release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. And it goes from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health-damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. So for me, this information through my old training.
Man. See, this is why it's crazy that a lot of people don't know this, because this information should be in every school, it should be in every doctor's office, it should be everywhere. I mean, you can actually shave off years of your life expectancy by exposing your children to childhood trauma and too many adverse situations, right? And there's so many factors that come into place, man, especially when you think about today's kids. Think about today's kids that live on the south side of Jackson. Ask them, how many friends have they lost due to gun violence? Ask them, how many times have they gone to sleep and actually feared for their lives? How many times have they heard gunshots ringing in their neighborhood? How many times have they been harassed by the police. Ask these kids these questions. Once you start asking those questions, you're going to start finding out that a lot of people in our community are suffering from the effects of childhood trauma. A lot of people, generational trauma. That's why I want to wrap everything up in today's video with the importance of us, right? To start opening our mouths so that we can start talking about these things. We need to have these conversations. We need people to know that it's okay to reach out to get help. We have to educate moms to let them know the dangers of making poor choices. People who have grown up in homes with a lot of adverse childhood experiences, she said very plainly, the statistics show that you're going to make poor decisions. This is why people with 7 or more ACEs, they can pretty much predict that you're going to suffer from either heart failure. They know that you're going to suffer from poor spending habits, poor financial management. They know that you're going to suffer with bad decision making when it comes to sexual partners. They know the chances of you becoming addicted to alcohol are extremely high. Why? Because all of these things are coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms, mechanisms that we use to deal with the pain. Instead of healing from the pain, we mask the pain. And we've been taught to do that generationally. I'm speaking on this specifically because we have to know that for many of our boys, this childhood trauma that impacts their emotional regulation, it impacts their relationships, it impacts their cognitive development. This is what puts our boys on that school to prison pipeline. This is what causes our boys to negatively feel the effects of racism, discrimination, community violence. All of those things affect those children more because of their inability to regulate their emotions. This is why we have a whole term called crash out. Ask anybody in our community what that means if you don't know. Crash out. Where do you think that comes from? Not caring. Basically getting to the point where you don't care about nothing. Whether you live, whether you die, whether you get in trouble, whether anybody likes you or not. You're just willing to crash out. It's because we haven't been taught how to regulate our emotions. We haven't been taught to open our mouths when we're not feeling right. All of these things is like, it's new to us. We ain't used to that kind of stuff. But that's why it's important for us to break the stigmas. Because if we don't start opening our mouth and we don't start creating spaces where people can feel safe and they could talk about their problems, they could talk about what's going on, whether mentally or physically, we're just going to keep going through the same thing. We got to break the cycle. We got to address it now. Hopefully, this can start further conversations because I'm not a health expert. I'm not a mental health expert or nothing like that. I'm just somebody that goes through it in my own personal life. And I've learned to manage my mental health. I've learned to recognize when I'm getting into those severe dark moments. And now as a 40-year-old man, I'm learning to ask for help now when I get into those severely dark moments. Because in the past, I used to feel that I had to put myself out of it myself. But now, as I get older, I'm realizing that it's okay to ask for help and it's acceptable. It's all right. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you different. It just means that you need help. Understanding, though, that a lot of it isn't your fault. That's where it starts. When you understand that a lot of it isn't your fault, it was due to the childhood trauma. It was due to the generational trauma. Why you have learning disabilities, why you can't concentrate, why you can't sit still, why you make poor choices and you got 4 kids before you're 30, why you started smoking cigarettes in the 6th grade, why you started smoking weed in the 8th grade. You start to understand that these were coping mechanisms. So hopefully y'all got something out of this episode, man. I really don't got too much more to say about it. This is just one of those things that we're just going to keep having these conversations and keep having those conversations. Because I think the more people that talk about it, the more people that acknowledge it, like the better we're going to be as a community. Because we have too many people that are not getting help, man. If you rewind the video, you'll hear the stats on how many people are actually going out to get service, and the numbers are low. They're low, and it's because people don't have faith in the science, people don't have faith in doctors, and people don't have faith in the pharmaceutical companies. So I'm gonna close with this, man. I want you guys to take action, whether it's joining a support group, talking to your doctor, or seeking a therapist, or just simply finding a friend that can be that therapist for you. I want y'all to find somebody to talk to, man, and start talking to people, especially people that you're close to. Um, just realize that you're not alone in this fight. Somewhere around this huge world, there are millions of people going through the same thing that you're going through, if not worse. So seeking out for help isn't weakness. Don't think of it as weakness. It's actually just the first step toward healing and breaking the cycle. Hopefully this helps y'all. Hope y'all take something with this. Take something with you from this message. Especially my young brothers. It's okay. It's okay to talk feelings. It's okay to talk your emotions. And it's okay to say that you don't understand something. If you need help, reach out to your local professionals. In Jackson, we got a lot of mental health therapists I'm finding. I found a new one called Love Entirely LLC. They do genuine solutions and counseling for cognitive behavior. There's also a healing place in Jackson. And we got Lifeways too, one of the biggest. So no matter what you're going through, what you're feeling, if you start to recognize the signs that something isn't right, it's best to go seek help, man. And if you're noticing, especially if you have a young black male child, if you have a black son from the ages of 15 to 24, You need to be paying attention to them. You need to be paying attention to them. Suicide is the leading cause of death for young black males from 15 to 24. So there's going to be signs, there's going to be tells that let you know somebody's suffering, especially your child. You're going to be able to recognize that. It's our job to be there to support them and to help them to understand that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to go get help. We're going to continue these conversations. Like I said, maybe I'll start a series, a mental health series. I do know a few professionals that I'd like to have on the show. Um, if someone is watching and they do this for a living and would like to come on the show and either talk about mental health, trauma, generational trauma, epigenetics, anything like that, I would love to have you on the show. Give us either a message on the Facebook page at Community Soldier or leave us a comment in one of the videos and we will send you our email, which is justin.communitysoldier@gmail.com. You can send us an email and, maybe we get you on the show. If you're just tuning in, make sure you watch back the video. Epigenetics. Epigenetics. Epigenetics basically is it's a science of genes, DNA, and scientists are finding out that in our DNA there's actual memories. So there's actual information coded in our DNA. They learned this from studying rats. They took a group of rats and every single day they would introduce them to peanut butter. And when they introduced them to the peanut butter, they would shock them. So the rats grew up being shocked every time the peanut butter was introduced to them. Then they had children. The offspring, they kept them separate from their parents. So they weren't raised together with their parents. They were raised separate from their parents. They never shocked them when they introduced them to the peanut butter. But for some reason, the children of the mice who were shocked, they were terrified of the peanut butter. Even though they were never raised by their parents, they were terrified of the peanut butter. That's what kind of tips scientists off, researchers off into studying memories and how we pass on information through the birthing process. This is how women inherit that motherly nature, right? Scientists knows that is hundreds and hundreds of years of information that's actually coded in your DNA so that it's natural for you. It becomes a natural response for you. So, I mean, epigenetics is a good study. Maybe I'll do a podcast on that one of these days, especially if I can find somebody that's, proficient in the topic. YouTube, they don't like for me to play other YouTube videos due to the copyright laws. So it's hard for me to play someone else's videos, their intellectual property on the lives, but there's really no other way for me to do it. So for the time being, I'll do it. Keep doing it. YouTube will just not like it, and they won't show my videos. But if it helps people understand, I'll keep doing that. Like I said, I'm looking for someone that's actually studies this for a living. I would love to have you come on the show and talk about it a little bit. But thanks for joining tonight, guys. I hope you caught something, you learned something. If you have any comments, leave me a comment. Next time, I really wanted to do a giveaway. But we'll do it next time. We didn't have enough comments, so hopefully next time we get enough comments, and then I could do a nice little giveaway. You know what I mean? There was only one comment today, so it wouldn't have been fair. So maybe next time. And what we're going to be giving away is a free filler bag from All for Less retail bins, retailed at $10. So make sure y'all catch us next week. We will do the giveaway live on the show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Much love, y'all.
Grandpa told me you lucky to have one friend. Situations in life coming, you gotta trust them. Found out many times in life you can't trust men. So I rolled solo, that process was an adjustment. Friends let you down, not around when you needing them. Only here to take like a child, got you feeding them. Better off leaving them like salt, that's the seasoning. Killing black people, that sugar really depleting them. Knowledge over ignorance, rising above predicaments. Fighting for equality, speaking for all the innocents. These drugs they been giving us, turning our people vigilant. Innocent dissidents, violence is coming imminent. Gotta fall a couple times to learn the lessons faster. Thinking will it matter if I skip a couple chapters? This life that I'm after got me climbing up the ladder. Won't be a